So I'm Andrew Howe, Head of End User Services at the University of St Andrews. I'm going to briefly mention what St Andrews is. So St Andrews is I suppose it's a small fishing village in east of Scotland, but it's got a relatively famous golf course, a relatively historic golf course, and it's got an equally famous and historic university. From a university perspective, we have about 8,500 students, and we have about 2,500 full-time equivalent staff. The university is over 600 years old and relatively famous, and 45% of our students come from out with the UK. What I'm going to be doing today is talking about creating user-centric services whilst maintaining corporate compliance. This really is a kind of passion of mine, user-centric IT. So what is user-centric IT? I suppose from my perspective, what I see it as delivering IT for the individual user. Other people have put together what they think is user-centric IT, so it's either viewing users as customers, it might be improving IT experience for users, it might be empowering users, it might be putting people first. The concept is that we really want to see IT as an enabling service and not just a kind of sideline, not just technology for technology's sake. So why are user-centric services so important? I suppose for me, the most important aspect here, and it's been driven by IT consumerization. So it's the technology that we all have in our personal lives. So most people here today are from within higher education. We all provide IT, but we're also consumers of IT. So in our personal lives, we have access to absolutely fabulous technology. And I think what that's doing is that's driving what our expectations are within the enterprise. So there's a quote here from Gartner on what they think as IT consumerization. So it's effectively the impact that consumer-originated technologies have on enterprises. And it's really driving what organizations, particularly what I think higher education are doing today. So why? Expectations, in my opinion, are rising quite dramatically. So staff and students have this fabulous technology in their personal lives, and they want to consume that when they come to the enterprise. They want to consume that in the university environment. I suppose a university's main customer is a student, and these students are young, they're a mobile user base, and they don't really want to draw that line between what they have in their personal lives and then suddenly coming to university and having less. What I call the 9K fees era is also rising expectations. I mean, when I was at university, I was really only interested in the price of a pint. But I think nowadays, students are, and we're seeing this in feedback, that students are really interested in technology, and they're coming back every time something's not working absolutely perfectly, or they're not able to access the technology that they're able to access in their personal lives. They're coming back and they're saying, why are we not able to do this? So the rising expectations are really driving what we're doing here. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go through a day in the life of a person. That person is probably me at the moment, but you can all relate to this sort of technology. So it's what technology do we have in our personal lives today? So I suppose the first thing we do is wake up in the morning, we have Wi-Fi. So I woke up this morning at 5:10, horrible time of the morning, shouldn't actually exist, and I had Wi-Fi. I got on a train from Dundee to Leeds, and I had Wi-Fi. I arrived at the hotel, I had Wi-Fi. I think Wi-Fi now is just an absolute expectation. I had one of my friends come round to the house 2 or 3 weeks ago with his young son. He was 10 years old. Literally the minute he entered the door, the first thing he said to me was, "Uncle Andrew, can I have your Wi-Fi password?" I think that's just the way of it. It's just an expectation. And our students expect to have it right the way across our campus in every single location. I did find quite a nice, interesting slide that talks about, so I don't know if anyone knows about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Someone put Wi-Fi at the bottom of it there, and I think that's really very, very true. Wi-Fi is no longer one of these things that's a kind of nice to have, it's an absolute must. So after I've woken up, what do? Rather sadly, I probably reach for my smartphone. And don't laugh, because you all do it as well. It's just an expectation that that's the first thing you do in the morning. I pick it up, I maybe look at a news site, or I look at the internet, or I perhaps look at social media. And again, if we look at kind of students in an organization in higher education, students will all use social media. They'll all have Facebook, they'll all have Twitter. Some audience participation here. How many people in the audience have a LinkedIn account or use LinkedIn? Put your hand up if you do. So pretty much everyone. Keep your hand up if you also have a Twitter account. Keep your hand up if you also have Facebook. Ooh, a few hands going down. You get the drift. These technologies, they're so available. Students are using these technologies, and the expectation now is that they want to be able to use these technologies, and not just from a personal point of view on the campus, but also integrated within their learning and teaching or their research environments. So I got up by this point, but I still want to use technology. So I went into the living room and I picked up my tablet. Again, these are so prevalent in the student spaces. I walked into the library at St Andrews a couple of weeks ago, and all I saw was tablets. It was just tablets everywhere. And again, students expect to be able to use these tablets, not just from a personal perspective, but also to be able to use them in their learning and teaching. So they're expecting universities to have a strategy around mobile first. They're expecting to be able to consume services on a tablet device. A relatively interesting story. I had a sore back 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I was lying on the couch, and I asked my wife to bring me a tablet. She didn't hear me. But my 4-year-old son came through with my iPad. Now, it sounds a relatively cute story about my son, but actually the most important aspect is he just assumed that's what a tablet was. He's 4 years old, he can swipe it, he can put in my number, he can go onto YouTube, and he can type in Lego Fireman. He's 4 years old, but in 14 years' time, he will probably be one of our customers in higher education. So we need to listen to these people. So what did I do next? I probably went to an app store. I probably either used an app that I've downloaded, or I downloaded an app. Again, there's an expectation that students and staff want to consume these technologies within our campuses. So they don't want to have to wait for the IT department to come and install a piece of technology. They want to be able to self-serve. They want to be able to access these applications themselves. They want to be able to do it seamlessly on their mobile devices. What did I do next? I probably connected to a television using a mobile communication technology. And again, it's quite seamless. It's very user-centric, and we've all got it in our personal lives. But again, within the enterprise, a student might come to a meeting or come to a teaching space, and they might need to plug in a cable, and they don't have access to this seamless technology. And the expectation is that they want to. They need this sort of technology. So I actually completely left the house now and went outside. I went and met some friends in town. But I'd forgotten I wanted to record the football. In the previous era of my life, I wouldn't have been able to do that because I had an old VCR and I wasn't able to do it. But I was now able to remotely record a television program from where I was out and about in the town. Again, a good example of user-centric technology. I didn't need to be in a specific location. I was able to do that from any location on any device. When I was in town, I met a friend, and I was talking to him about a project I was doing at work, and I wanted to show him a document. Again, previously, I might have had that on a laptop, or I might have had it on a file server. But now, with public cloud technologies and enterprise sync and share products being so prevalent, I was able to show my friend this on my mobile device. Now, this was really cool. I went and took my car for a service, and I drove in, I parked the car, and I went to the lady at the reception, and I handed her my key. She took my key, and then she printed off everything that was needed to be done to my car. And I looked at her. She didn't look like Paul Daniels, but it sounded like magic. She was able to understand from the communication that was delivered from the car to the key fob what information was needed and what work was needed to be done. Again, a very user-centric piece of technology, both from a consumer point of view and from the vendor's point of view. I was out and about, but I wanted to turn the heating off. I'm able to do this when I'm out and about. Again, user-centric technology. My wife and I are quite temperature incompatible. She would probably actually tell you we're just incompatible in general. So I like the place really cold, and she likes the place really hot. And I like winding up by turning the heating off when I'm out. When I was a student, and when I was at university, if I was wanting to call my parents, I had to go about 300-400 yards down the road to a pay phone box and put in 10 pences and phone them. This morning, I was able to FaceTime my son, really user-centric, really great technology. I was able to use Skype for Business and speak to people back at the office. Amazing technology that we've all got in our personal lives, and we just expect these to be there and prevalent in the enterprise. So that was a day in the life of me, but I think everyone in the audience here can relate to using those sort of technologies in their personal life. So what do we have from a technology point of view when we come to a university? I think there's a piece of technology in the corner there. And I think there's a telephone as well. Now, I'm being slightly facetious, because obviously university is a lot more advanced than this from a technology point of view. But there's a perception, whether it's reality or whether it is just a perception, that the technology that users are able to consume in their personal life is a lot greater and a lot more available than the technology they can use when they attend the enterprise, in our case, is higher education. Why else is it so important? So I think user-centric technology can provide a competitive advantage. So higher education is a very competitive environment, and we're all competing for the same students. And I don't think it's just the reputation of the university, it's campus, it's teaching excellence that can attract students. I think technology plays a critical role in attracting students, both today and in the future. We also see through things like National Student Survey or iGrad that the quality of technology and the prevalence of user-centric technology, technology that we have in our personal lives, plays a core role in how they see the university, how they react to the university. So we see free text comments back in the National Student Survey. You know, I use Dropbox in my personal life, but I come to the university and I've only got 25 meg of storage on your file servers and this sort of stuff. So I think going forward, if National Student Survey and these sorts of league tables, they're very important to universities and they'll be more important going forward. Technology plays a core role. It's not just about campus condition or sporting excellence or teaching quality. And again, the last point there is I think there's an opportunity for user-centric technology to not just attract students, but also retain students. You know, going to university when you're 17, 18, 19 years old, it can be quite a big deal. A lot of people can be homesick, you're traveling, and giving students access to technology that they use in their personal lives to be able to communicate with their parents and communicate with their friends and feel part of the campus. It's a really important, so I think universities have a moral obligation to support these students. Not only that attrition rates and continuation rates are really important for universities themselves. And I think lastly, and this is quite important as well, that if IT don't provide these services, someone else will. So users are able to consume the services in other ways. Now that could well be an academic providing the services themselves. It could well be a support member of staff within the school, within the faculty. But other people will find ways to provide these services if IT are not doing it. That's creating a duplication of resource. It's increasing costs. They're probably not being provided in the right way with the right corporate compliance. So IT really should be seen as an enabling service. IT departments shouldn't be viewed as the IT police. They should provide enabling technology that can support the needs of the individual users. So that was the fun bit. Now the dry bit. Corporate compliance, is that important? Clearly. So universities are required to ensure that IT systems and services are provided in accordance with relevant legislation. So we've got things like the Data Protection Act. It's important that we secure our data. Universities have been, and other organisations have been very heavily fined by the Information Commissioner's Office if they aren't seen to be doing the right thing with regards to compliance, with regards to complying with policies like the Data Protection Act. Universities themselves will often have internal acceptable use policies, and they're really put in place so that we can actually make sure that IT is being done the right way. We're meeting these legal obligations. We've also got moral obligations as well. So everyone in this room is probably part of a university, but we're also a consumer as well. So the university we belong to will be storing our details in some way. Now, there'll be personal details. That might be our address, it might be our pay details, it might be ethnicity, it might be lots of different information that the university holds on us. There's a moral obligation that the university stores them safely. So it's about doing the right thing, not just from a legal point of view, from a moral point of view. I think security for me is a bit of a given. Some of the user-centric stuff, it's nice to have, but when we're providing services within higher education, within IT, we do it using best practice information security. Certainly speaking to my CIO and other CIOs, it's probably that cybersecurity is that one topic that keeps them awake at night. I wouldn't have liked to be the CIO at Talk recently. I don't think that would have been a fun few days. So I think it really is important that we make sure we provide our services in a secure way. It's not just about legal and moral obligations, though. It's about actually delivering services in a sustainable way. So what we don't want to do is, if for example, we are providing a software application to the whole campus, what we don't want to do is we don't want to have to do that individually for every user. We don't want to have to send someone out with some media and install it on every device. It's about doing something the right way. It's about sustainability. It's about putting in place systems that are secure and allow us to deliver IT services in a sustainable way. Why? Because it's a tough financial climate. We have finite resource, and there's pressures on finances. So it's not just about corporate compliance for me isn't just about legal and moral obligations. It's about doing IT the right way. It's about doing IT in a sustainable way. So, the key question, can we have our cake and eat it? So I personally believe we can. And I think the key to it for me is maintaining a balance. It's maintaining a balance between security and flexibility. So I think there's a scale, and at one side of the scale there's probably secure, and at one side of the scale there's flexible. And I think the key is for each organisation to find the right point on the scale. And I think even more key to that is it's not about the IT department defining what is the right point on that scale. It's about the business. It's about the appetite for each organisation to determine where they fit on that scale. I do some external work in Scotland with the Scottish Wide Area Network, and on that group there's various sectors represented, from Police Scotland to National Health Service, and they will probably be slightly different from a higher education point of view. They will probably sit slightly more on the secure scale than the flexible scale. Now, that's fine, because their institution determines that that's their appetite for providing those services. We have some very interesting conversations when I speak to guys from Police Scotland about what we're doing in higher education, and they look absolutely aghast, because it's the kind of thing they probably wouldn't want to do in a police environment, a very compliant environment. So my experience has been primarily in higher education, and I think that we probably do sit more on the flexible side of the scale than the secure side of the scale. Why? For me, I think it's probably primarily because universities are seen to be innovative, and IT doesn't want to be seen there to stifle innovation. That could be innovation in research, it could be innovation in learning and teaching, or it could be innovation in the support services. And in higher education, we all have to deal with some interesting people. They're called academics. And academics generally want to be innovative, and they historically have seen as IT as being the kind of monolithic kind of guys and impinging on our freedom. And what we really want to do there is we want to find that balance. We want to not restrict them, we want to let them innovate, but we want to do it in a secure and sustainable way. I think for me, one size doesn't fit all, and I think that's a really important message. And I don't just mean that's within the university space in general, so I don't think every single organisation represented in this room will all have the same idea of where they sit on that scale. But I'm also talking about within an organisation. So you might decide that within your organisation that you want to sit slightly more on the flexible side, but there might be pockets of that organisation that maybe needs to be a little bit more secure. So I think it's really important that one size doesn't fit all. It's finding that balance, but it's also meeting the needs of the individuals within the community. So how do we maintain this balance? So I think there's 5 ways in which we can maintain this balance. It's through leadership, it's through user engagement, it's through IT service management techniques, it's through customer service, and then of course, it's through technology. So leadership. Why is leadership important? Leadership is important because the person at the top of the organisation, whether it's the IT director or whether it's the CIO, they're going to produce the strategy. They're going to tell us where we want to be on that scale. Do we want to be user-centric, or do we want to be more on the security side? So I think there's a real strong focus on following the leader there. And it's interesting because I saw a quote recently from Mike Bracken, who was the Chief Digital Officer from the Cooperative Group. So he wrote this here, and I've read their strategy in quite a lot of detail, and they do seem to be very focused on user-centric services within the cooperative. But the comment here was applying the culture, practices, processes, and technologies of the internet era to respond to people's raised expectations. So an example of an organisation that is obviously seeing the importance of user-centric services and putting them in place to meet the needs of that organisation. Why is leadership important? It's because generally we follow the leader. So I was out with some friends the other day, and we all have young children, so we were having a conversation around nature or nurture, living the dream, So I suppose, obviously, nature plays a part, but I do think children get their characteristics from how they're brought up by their parents. And I think it's no different within the enterprise as well. If our CIO or our IT director has a particular type of leadership and says we're going down this route, generally, as people within the organisation, we follow that. Hence why I think leadership is really, really vital in this regard. We're really lucky at the University of St Andrews with our CIO, Steve Watt, who sees IT as being very much an enabling technology. He wants IT to just be there to support the business and not be there to put in blocks and stifle innovation. So user engagement. I think for me personally, it's absolutely vital that technology is there to support the business. I don't think technology or our IT services or IT providers should just be the side thing that sits there next to the business. It should be absolutely fundamental. So everything we do from an IT perspective should be about supporting business requirements. How do we find out what those business requirements are? We need to engage with people. I personally don't think you can engage too much. If we really want to create services that are seen as user-centric, we need to really make time to find out what our users want, both on a collective and on an individual basis. We also need to make sure we consult and collaborate during all stages of the service management lifecycle. I've seen lots of bad examples before where you communicate with some users in the first instance, you find out what they're looking for, and then you don't speak to them ever again. You maybe deliver a service, but you never find out if it's actually met the brief. You never actually find out if it's done the right thing, if it's actually meeting those user requirements. We need to make sure we communicate the whole time, right throughout the service management lifecycle. And I suppose we've all been in the situation of deploying a technology just because it's new and shiny. But I think it's really important that it's not just about deploying technology because it's there, it's available, it's actually making sure it meets a business need. You know, I've seen examples in the past where organizations have deployed Apple TV right around the organization to support learning and teaching, and then the academics come back and said, I use Android devices in my teaching. So, great technology, and it is great technology, but it didn't meet the need in that example. So we need to make sure that we're not just deploying technology just because it's available. Having said that, I do think there's an onus on the technology providers to engage with customers to actually showcase the art of the possible. So this is a relatively famous quote that always gets attributed to Henry Ford, but I don't actually think Henry Ford ever said it, but you get the gist of what he's meaning here. If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So what we're meaning there is sometimes we take business requirements, but we don't want the users to actually say what technology can support those business requirements. It's important that the IT department, it's important that the technology providers can actually take those business requirements and translate them into IT services, into technology, and provide that. And as well as engaging to find out what people are actually wanting, it's important to engage at the same time and actually showcasing and promoting user-centric technology. So IT service management for me is really, really important as well. So I think you can have the best services, but if you don't actually have a way to support those services, they're absolutely pointless. And again, how do we know this? We know it from our personal lives. So we've all had examples of where we've consumed a service, we phoned up a help desk and said it's broken, and they've said, yeah, it's broken, we can't fix it. So they've got a great technology, they've got a great service, but they're not able to actually support it. So we must make sure that when we're providing technology, we put processes in place that can efficiently support that technology going forward. One of the things that we're doing at the University of St Andrews is we're looking at a policy around kind of shift left. So shift left effectively means moving issue resolution to the first line or as close to the customer as possible. In an ideal world, you actually move issue resolution to the customer using techniques like self-service. Why is this important? I think, again, we know from our personal lives that it increases customer satisfaction. We've all had examples whereby we might phone up a call center, or we might phone up someone and say, you know, we're looking for something to be fixed. If it gets fixed there and then, or if you can fix it using electronic means, or you can fix it using FAQs, great. If it gets bounced to someone else and someone will phone you back and they never phone you back, we get really, really frustrated. So we know that first contact resolution is really important. We know that from our personal lives, and we want to implement that in the enterprise so that we can increase that customer satisfaction. The issue impact decreases, and of course, from an institutional perspective, business productivity increases. Shift left isn't that easy. It requires quite a lot of things. Again, I go back to a previous slide. It requires leadership. It requires leadership within the organization to empower staff to go forward with that strategy. It requires people. It requires people in the organization that really want to deliver that strategy, that want to deliver that enhanced level of customer service. And I think on one of the previous speakers, we talked about collaboration. We talked about silos. There's no point in second or third line teams having all the knowledge and all the power. We need to pass on that knowledge to first line so that we can make sure that that first contact resolution can be achieved and we can really shift that whole thing left. And of course, technology is required as well. We can't do this without technology. So we need the right infrastructure to support the shift left strategy. So some technology around there is self-service. We all know, we've probably all had password self-service for quite a long time now, and we know how important that is. We want to be able to change our password at any time from any device. So for me, as well as IT service management, I think customer service is really, really, really important as well. So again, comment here. Again, you can have the best technology, and you can have the best support processes in place to support that technology. But for me, how you deal with people will really define whether you've got a truly user-centric service. I'm going to use an example. This is a Boeing 737-800 from Ryanair. Ryanair are actually a very successful company. So they're a very profitable company. It's a very competitive market. They're the second largest European airline by passengers carried, and they're the largest low-cost airline. They've got a very, very new fleet. I think their fleet age is under 5 years. But when it comes to customer service, we probably don't like Ryanair, do we? And if I go back to the leadership point of view, there's probably a reason why we don't like Ryanair. So although they're a very profitable company, although they're a very successful company, they're very good at what they do, people have probably got a perception about their level of customer service. So this was a quote in The Economist, which I found quite amusing, and having actually used Ryanair, quite true as well. But interestingly, in 2014, they had a couple of profit warnings. And they looked at their competitors. Now, those competitors could be EasyJet or Germanwings in that sector, or it could be Lufthansa or BA in the scheduled airline sector. But they realized that what those companies were doing to keep their profits high was actually providing good customer service. So the actual core of the company with what they do with new fleets and stuff was absolutely fantastic. But they realized that their customer service sucked. So Mr. Customer-Focused O'Leary decided that he'd put a campaign together to reinvent themselves. And a year later, they had a 37% rise in pre-tax profits. Now that's quite extraordinary. And obviously Michael O'Leary attributed that to that change in approach. So I think the key point there is they had a really successful company. They were very, very good at what they did, but they maybe didn't provide great customer service. So Michael O'Leary said this, which I found quite amusing also. I think it was said a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But I think the point there is that if a company like Ryanair did this and are seen as very successful, and they are very successful in what they do as a business, but wanted to tweak their customer service, and it had a big impact on what they did. 37% rise in pre-tax profits is nothing to be sniffing at. So the last thing, how do we maintain this balance? The last thing here is technology. So in our personal lives, we love self-service. Self-service is available now almost every single place we go, whether that's self-service online or whether that's relatively rudimentary self-service like FAQs. But if you go to a supermarket, you probably don't queue anymore and speak to someone. You probably use one of these. If you go to an airport, again, you probably don't queue and speak to anyone. You'll probably use one of these. Oops. And if you go to a bank, most people don't because they'll do internet banking. But if you do go to a bank, you'll probably use one of these. So again, at the University of St Andrews, we feel that self-service is quite important in regards to finding that balance between creating a user-centric service and making it nice and secure. So we know for a while now that most organizations have been using password self-service very successfully. One of the things we're really embarking on now is things like software application self-service. So again, I go back to a previous slide where in our personal lives we're able to go to iTunes or equivalent stores, we're able to install technology, we don't need to understand how to do it, we don't need to package it, we just install it, it works, we use it. We want to provide the same kind of service to our users, to our staff and students. We want to be able to provide software application via self-service. We want to provide those software applications to be delivered both on campus, to their own devices, from anywhere. And we're working on this very heavily at the moment. So for the next academic year, starting in September, all our applications are going to be delivered, streamed, using a self-service portal. And we feel this is a really good example of a user-centric service that our students consume in their personal lives, and will be delighted they can now consume in the enterprise. We're also looking at infrastructure self-service. So if we think of a researcher might want to spin up a virtual machine. They might want a virtual machine that's got a couple of cores, some RAM, want some firewall rules. So again, with technology in our personal lives like Microsoft Azure or AWS, you can do this sort of stuff. You can spin up VMs, but in the enterprise, you've got to log a call with the service desk and ask for what you want and blah, blah, blah. So again, we're looking at being able to install infrastructure self-service so that users can consume this technology without having to really come to us, and it can be done very seamlessly and very quickly. And then support self-service. So if users have an incident or want to have a service request, they can actually self-service that, whether that's installing a hotfix or whether that's installing a patch. They can actually consume this via self-service. And that's what we're looking at now at the University of St Andrews. I think it's important to remember, back to one of my previous slides, is that one size doesn't fit all. I went shopping with my dad recently, and we went to a self-service checkout. It wasn't a pleasant experience. He was absolutely hopeless. Didn't understand how to do it, was holding up tins of beans and waiting for people to come and tell him what to do. It was a painful experience. And we had some similar experiences at the university as well, when we've asked users to self-service an application. Particularly, you said to me, you work in IT, I'm a professor, you come and do this for us. So we need to understand, although we see this as a service that our users want to consume, that one size doesn't fit all. We will maybe have a certain generation of staff that don't want to consume the service in that way. They want to consume it in the traditional way, and we need to cater for that. Just finishing off from a technology point of view, some other technology that I think is able to give us that balance between user empowerment and security is privilege management software. So every single organization will have probably had the conversation at some stage about, do we give our users admin rights or don't we give our users admin rights? How many organizations here give their users local administrative rights? Okay, so there's a few people. So there's no wrong and right answer here. I don't think giving them is a bad thing, and I don't think not giving them is a bad thing. But there's a general perception that if a user has local admin rights, it's very flexible and they can do what they like, but it's maybe not so secure. If a user doesn't have admin rights, it's not very flexible, they moan at us, but it's quite secure. Privilege management software just gives us the ability to have our cake and eat it. So we're able to kind of configure devices that allow users to install software, but in a secure way, elevating privileges, but they're not susceptible to all the bad stuff when they're doing their daily tasks. So it's just one example of a piece of technology that we can try and use to create that balance between empowering the users, giving them that flexibility, but making sure we're creating a corporate compliant environment. Cloud services as well. I think there's a feeling that in a lot of organizations we're not willing to embrace cloud services, and yet in our personal lives we probably all love cloud services. How many people use Dropbox? So pretty much everyone. So a few years ago we remember saying in organizations, oh no, you can't use Dropbox, we don't want you to use Dropbox, it's not secure. What's the alternative? Oh, we don't have one. So I think we need to embrace cloud services. There's fantastic technology out there from an enterprise perspective that allows us to provide these same services, whether it's through systems like Box, whether it's through Dropbox Enterprise, whether it's through OneDrive for Business. Enterprise file sync and share is there, and we need to embrace the cloud. We need to embrace the public cloud because these technologies are seen as very user-centric. Users consume them in their personal lives, but when they come to the enterprise, no, you can't have them. We need to change that. Bring your own device is really important as well. I know a lot of organizations that say they support bring your own device, but what they really mean is they've got a wireless access point sitting in the roof in one room. That for me is not supporting bring your own device. Organizations need to have a strategy around mobile first. Mobile is a preference now for how users want to work, and we need to make sure that they can consume all our services through mobile. We don't want to go to a lecture theatre and say, well, it supports bring your own device, but it holds 300 people and it's got one wireless access point. We need to cater in the enterprise for students bringing 3, 4, 5 devices, and the infrastructure needs to support that if we're going to truly say we support BYOD in the enterprise. Finally there, what I've said is user customized technology rather than one approach for all. What I'm really meaning there is I think there's a feeling, certainly within higher education, that we only deliver services if it meets the entire organisation's needs. I think sometimes what we need to do is we need to find pockets of the university who are willing to innovate, who are wanting to drive it forward, use technology and they can almost showcase it to others and let them follow. Too often we say we don't want to do that because not everyone needs it, whereas actually the rest of the organisation don't know they need it until it's in there and it's working. So pockets of the organisation can bring the rest of the organisation along with them. I think I'm keeping you from your drinks and food, so I'm going to finish. In summary, I think there really must be a shift from traditional IT to user-centric IT. I think the key is we need to work with the business to deliver IT services. It's not really there for the technology providers to deliver IT services. We've heard before from previous speakers, it's collaborative. We must deliver these services together. We must understand what the business wants to deliver these services. We need to focus on users, not technology. We need to understand their requirements and suggest technology that can underpin those requirements. We need to empower, not enforce. Technology is never going to bed in if we're just saying you must have it. We must empower our users to use this technology. And again, I've mentioned it before, but one size doesn't fit all. We need to adapt to how people work, not the other way around. And mobility is a work style preference. Universities and other organisations probably need to have a mobile-first strategy. We need to make our services available via mobile platforms. Security is obviously important, but it shouldn't be the sole emphasis. It should be secure and easy to use, rather than the sole focus on being security. We must put in proactive support services. I don't think there's any point in having the best technology if we're not able to support it. And lastly, we must be nice to people. We should all be like the new Michael O'Leary rather than the old Michael O'Leary. So I'm going to wrap it up there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, we've got time for questions. Then the next question. Any questions?
Hi, thanks for that. That was an impressively high volume of useful information in a short time, so that was great. You mentioned about file sync and share and embracing cloud services. What does that look like in the higher education context? How do you actually go about that?
I think it probably needs leadership. So, I think we need to get the academics on board, get governance people on board, because I don't think there's a general issue with cloud services. So they work, we know they work, but I think a lot of people are worried about where the data is stored, what data you can store in it. So I think we need to have clear policies, what data we can store in them. Many organisations I know don't really have a clear policy around what data they can store in it. So users are a bit confused as to, can I store personal data in it? Can I store confidential data in it? So I think some clear leadership around, do we want to embrace this technology? A clear policy on how we can use this technology, and then really promoting it around the institution.
Hi, thanks again for that. It was really enlightening and useful. Going back to Michael O'Leary, for him it's easy. 37% increase in profits, yeah, that's a no-brainer. So what makes it a no-brainer in higher education? What measure do we have to say, right, this is the business case for doing all this? How do we do that?
So I think when it comes to the customer service element, for me, I think customer service is the key differentiator. So if we look at universities all around the United Kingdom, we all provide pretty much the same services. We've probably all got Office 365 or the Google equivalent. We probably all provide a Windows desktop. We probably all provide the same audiovisual technology in our teaching spaces. What can actually be the key differentiator is customer service. So customer satisfaction, I think, can be the key differentiator. Because from a technology point of view, we probably all provide the same services. So that's where I think that's where the Ryanair case for me was very interesting, because what they did as an airline was actually quite impressive before, but they realised to be even better, that's maybe the differentiator. And I think it's probably, for me, it's the same within higher education, that we provide all the same services, and how can we really make sure we're just that 1 or 2% better than our competitors, and it's around making sure we provide the right services and we talk to people in the right way.
to Andrew.